All right, welcome back to the Survival and Basic Badass podcast, Kevin and Chuck. Today, well, we're going to talk about planning your homestead. I was listening to a Glenn Beck video and the other day, and he was talking about inflation and how things are kind of getting a little hairy out there, and he basically said wherever you are now is or wherever you are when inflation hits or things go bad is where you're going to end up being,
Right.
kind of to ride it out. And I think that's true. And I think you may want to like hunker down a little bit and kind of set up your property, or if you're planning on moving and getting out from where you are, you may want to do that now, and you might want to start taking action to get things set up. Basically, what it's all about is when things start to get a little hairy, you're not going to be, hey, let's buy a new house right now, when people are worried about barely hanging on to their job and barely hanging on to whatever. It's not a time when you can really make a good life transition, or at least without substantial cost. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think it'll cost you more to do it.
Right.
So basically, I want to kind of lay out your how you should lay out your property and decide, what's going on, where you should put things, what essentials should you have in your property. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like, when you pick a location, right now, you may already have a property. And if you already have your property where you're going to be at,
Right. You got what you got.
you got what you got, but maybe there's certain steps we can take to kind of make it function a little bit better than it is right now. And I think that's kind of, what we should be doing. And
Yeah.
so that's the bottom line. So location, obviously distance to your job, the expense of commuting, if there's tolls or that kind of thing, you take that into account. The roads in the winter, how is it like that? Does that matter? I don't know. I know some with like scary driveways or long private roads. If you got little kids, that kind of matters. The distance to things that you do, your job, your church, getting into town to get things. Does it have electricity, mail, that kind of stuff? One of the things I notice is, like, if I get something shipped to my house from Amazon, it's always like, oh, it'll take 4 or 5 days to get there. And then
Right.
when I change the address and I'm like, oh, send this to Kevin's house, and it's like, oh, it'll be there tomorrow. And I'm like,
Right.
what the fuck? I mean, that's ridiculous. So, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That's what, things you might want to take into account and plan out.
Right.
Other thoughts come to mind, Kevin?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a water source an important thing. Now, if you have streams or a small creek on your property, that's great. That's great. But sometimes you might have to. You can dig a pond. If you have a small spring or a small stream, you can dig out a pond and create a water source. I know if you travel across the Midwest, you'll see every place that there's an overpass, there's a little pond next to it. It's because they
Right.
dig out a big hole next to where they build the overpass for the dirt, and then it fills up with rainwater, and the farmers use that for their animals. It's kind of a win-win situation. But the truth is, if you find a low spot on your property and you dig a big hole, it's going to fill up with water. It might just turn into a mud pit. That's no good. But you can set up a small filtration or a pump system that'll keep the water moving and keep it from getting slimy and gross. But it all really depends on your property. It depends on what you're working with. And I would say if you're looking or shopping for a homestead for a piece of property, you'd want to find at least something that has a small stream or a creek on it.
That is ideal. Or, if you're going to have a tractor or whatever, something you can dig out. Another thing when it comes to water is, where do you get your water from? Is it municipal water, which obviously comes with a water bill.
Hmm.
Is it, a well? Is it a deep well? Is it a shallow well? These things matter, but they're not that big a deal. The well, how fast it replenishes. If you are planning on doing significant farming,
Right.
where you're going to have to water it, you do need to check into, is this well going to have enough, supply
Right.
for, to sustain what we're doing here. That
Yeah, I'd say
matters.
for a 10 acre homestead, you want that well to consistently produce 30 gallons a minute.
Right.
You're going to want to run it for several days and verify that you can get that much water. Because if it's not, you might not. You might have to go deeper. You might have
Yeah.
to find another water source.
Right. And that's, these are things you want to look at. Does it have, municipal sewer? You have a septic tank. Is the septic tank going to be in the way, my leach field or whatever, or where I'm planning on building stuff? And none of this is usually a deal breaker, but it's all something up. Not having enough water is kind of a deal breaker if
Right.
you're planning on farming. But the rest of it, you need to see what's there. You need to figure out how much land is really available to you, how much, you're looking at getting. I would think maybe an acre is probably a little small and probably not going to be sustainable, but
Right.
it really depends. If that's what you can get where you are, or maybe that's what your budget allows, then I'd say that's probably what you should do.
Right.
But I think ideally you should be looking at a minimum of 5 acres in a perfect world. But I think any happy medium between 1 and 5, can get you there. Think of the soil and what it would be like to grow in it. We were looking at doing a farm when I bought, my property here. And my wife went and checked out a bunch of soil maps and all this stuff before we purchased the property.
Right.
This
Right. And
is,
it makes a difference.
right. Again, you can make whatever you have kind of work, but even better if you buy the right thing, and it does make a difference. They say the depth of the soil, I know in New York, shit, it was like 2 inches of dirt at most on top of rock was my entire yard.
Right.
And, it just depends. Now, Kevin wasn't that far away from where I was, and his soil's a lot better than what I had.
Yeah. No problems at my place. Yeah. I mean, but here's the thing though, you do have to kind of work with the soil that you have. Even if you have ideal soil, some things aren't going to grow in ideal soil. Some things want acidic soil. Some things want, high pH. But I've got clay, which is great for retaining water.
Right.
Plants that love water like my soil. Things that are drier, that don't want that much water, they don't grow great here.
Right.
You don't want more sandy or loamy soil for that sort of stuff.
Right.
And it really depends on what you're going to be successful growing. And it can be, you can have terrible soil and still find things to plant there. But you want to keep your options as open as possible. So the better the soil, the better you're going to do with almost every crop.
Exactly.
It's not gonna affect, negatively affect most of the plants you grow, as long as and also when you're planting certain crops, you can amend the soil for those certain crops. You can adjust the soil, add compost or add whatever, add manure, whatever it is that you need to add that's
Right.
going to give that soil in that specific area a specific type of pH and a consistency that's going to be good for that crop. When it comes to that sort of stuff, my dad always used to say, never dig a 10-cent hole for a $10
$10
plant.
plant. Yep.
Right. So when you're planting, it's worthwhile to spend a little time, digging it out deeper than it needs to be, filling it backfilling it with, the right type of soil for that plant, and just making a plan for that plant, especially when it comes to things like trees and bushes.
Right.
Making a long-term plan for that plant. Don't just stick it in the ground and just hope that it's going to work out, because it won't. Now I wanted to talk real quick, but we're talking about homesteading. I wanted to talk about long-term planting. Now, a lot of people do annual crops. That's fine. That's great. Growing corn and growing spinach and tomato plants and whatever it is that you want to do. But let's talk about growing some trees first. Getting a good base started, because you can plant a bunch of apple trees and walnut trees and that sort of stuff. You're not going to be harvesting that though.
Yeah.
Not in year one, not in year two. It's
Yeah,
a
it was about
long-term
3 to
plan.
5, right, for apple trees with me, and I bought, reasonable size. I guess
Right.
what you see at like Lowe's for 29 bucks or whatever. I bought them from a garden center, and I bought ones that were native to, my area, that kind of thing. But it took 3, 4 years. And then I found out
Right.
though that the squirrels were just getting me, man. Those little bastards that get up in there and just take everything I had.
They won't even wait for those
But
things to be ripe. They'll just run off with them.
no.
Little dickheads. Squirrels that eat apples, though, are delicious.
Mm. Apple flavored squirrel, huh?
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. No, that's definitely, something to think about is planting the trees early. Also, think about like a berry patch. Think
Hmm.
about, strawberries, raspberries, these things, they take time to get established and to start really producing a yield. But having all this stuff in the long term is really going to benefit you. And honestly, bad place to be spending your money when you're worried about inflation and you're like, gee, I'm going to have all this cash that's, not really worth anything. I may as well invest it in something. That's maybe the trick right there.
Right. Right. Um. Well, let's talk about trees real quick, and then move on to some bushes. So,
Yeah.
some good trees to grow are nut trees, like pecan, black walnut, um, almond, chestnut. It's really going to depend on where you live, which trees are going to grow best. But when it comes to nut trees, that's more of a long term
Right.
scenario. You're not going to get those nuts uh, raining down in your backyard overnight. That's going to take some time. Some fruit trees usually are a little bit better. They grow a little bit faster and start producing a little bit faster. I would expect with most fruit trees to not get a great harvest before 6 years. That's about what you're gonna want before you're really getting a good harvest out of any of those trees. Apple trees are great. I grow apple trees. I know, Chuck, you've done a few apple trees.
I have.
Um, Cherry trees are another good one. That's also, it's kind of a long term thing though before you really start getting some cherries out of it. Um, Pear trees are great. Peach trees are great. There's a million different trees you can grow that are fruits. One thing you really want to be conscientious of when you're growing fruit trees, though, is insects. They love that
Right.
stuff, man. Ants, beetles, just everything loves to get into those fruit and just tear them apart. I personally am not a super organic person. I'll spray the worst insecticide you can find on the market and just hose that thing down. I'll rip those apple trees off before I eat them, or those apples off before I eat them. But it's those things are going
Right.
to really go after your fruits, and you really want to. You can get um, organic pesticides that don't work, and if that's what you're into, you can do that. That's fine. But me, it's chemical warfare in my backyard during the spring. It's just nonstop all the time. Um, it is what it is. Maybe I'll get cancer when I'm 65. We'll see what happens. I'll let you know. I'll let you know how it works out. Uh,
Exactly.
Nut trees are not as bad with the insects, but you're definitely going to have a squirrel problem. And maybe a
Yeah.
squirrel problem is not really a problem. Maybe you just eat squirrel.
Eat more
That's not.
squirrel.
Yeah, it's not
Exactly.
a terrible situation to be in. Um, but yeah, I mean, when it comes to trees and it comes to long-term planning like that, you have to be conscientious of your area, your soil, and the pests that you're going to have to deal with. Another problem, or another thing when we talk about long term planning is bushes, right? Um, berry bushes mostly. Chuck, what are your favorite long-term plants for berries?
I had to say, I kind of go back to the basics. I'm not a fan of strawberries. Uh, they seem like a lot of work. I don't know. Once they're going, I agree they do kind of spread and do their thing, but I feel like little bastards are always getting them from me. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I feel like I know in New York I actually built cages that I put around them, and I'd have to go out and put these cages. They were just chicken wire boxes that I would set on
Right.
top of the strawberry patch because anything I didn't guard with my life, the animals came and took. And that's kind of with any berries and grapes. I have that with a lot of things,
Right.
but you need to go in. I would say blackberry, raspberry. I like I like blueberries. I think the bunch of those I do really well. The raspberries seem to actually last, and you get the fruit. I know the birds come in and pick at them, but they seem to have enough of a harvest that you can actually get
Right.
in on it. But
Yeah. I've actually had a lot of luck with strawberries this past couple of
yeah,
years. Yeah, just
no,
really
you're cool.
propagating them, spreading them, and I've got a good little plot that's just strawberries. And you have to look under the leaves and go through it a little bit, but you can usually get you know, I don't know, maybe 10 or 20 a day during the real harvest time, which is, it's not bad.
Right.
Um, you know, I have raspberries and blackberries. I don't, my blueberry bushes just seem to just not do anything. Not great. I plant them
Yeah.
and years and years and things will come by and tear the plants up, and I don't know, maybe they get too much sun, maybe they don't get, I mean, they're out in the sun, so they probably, it's either enough sun or too much, but I don't know what my problem is with blueberries. Just not doing well with the blueberries. So I'm
Right.
gonna have to do a little bit more research and
I
figure
I
out what I
know.
got wrong here.
Right. I know we planted some blueberry bushes and they just did miserable. And we wrote it out for about 2 years, and they didn't die, but they just never really thrived,
Hmm.
kind of like what you're saying.
Yeah.
And we scooped them up and moved them to another area of the yard. And the next year they were awesome. It
Yeah.
just needed the right location. I don't know if the soil, the sunlight, what the change was, but we made some changes and it really paid off. So that's something to consider. Another thing for your long term, planning ahead early, it would be asparagus.
Yes, yes. I'm a fan of asparagus. I've been growing asparagus for years and years now. Um, Now, it is one of those things where if you're starting from seed, you've got maybe 2, 3 years before you can actually harvest some good asparagus. But it is worth the wait. Asparagus is a great vegetable, a versatile vegetable. It's like it's packed with nutritional value. Like there's good stuff in there, man, and it's good fiber. You're gonna have some nice meaty turds. It's great. It's great stuff. It's gonna change your piece uh, a little bit. That's nothing wrong with that. Now, did you know this? That there's always jokes about asparagus pea, but there's
Right.
only like 60% of people can actually smell the smell that
Really?
asparagus pea makes. Right.
That's unusual.
So I
Unexpected is what I would
I
say.
don't ever smell any difference in my pee. But I have to admit, when I'm peeing on other people, they can tell that I've been eating asparagus. So I mean, it's a thing. It's a thing. I don't
Okay,
have
good
that
to know.
asparagus pea gene, I guess. It is what it is. You can't do anything about it. You just got to work with the hand you're dealt. Um, let's talk about mushrooms. Um,
Mushrooms. You
yeah,
sound
now
scary. I thought you always
uh,
die when you eat mushrooms.
you
That's
do,
not the
you do,
case.
and
Oh, okay.
when you eat the wrong mushrooms, um, a lot of people they won't tell you this in the books. Mushrooms
No.
that'll poison you, that'll kill you. There's a lot of them out there, and some of them look like the mushrooms that are edible, so it can be confusing. Um,
Yes.
but here's the thing: almost every poisonous mushroom is also a psychedelic mushroom. So you're going to be tripping,
While you're
and
dying.
you're dying of you're just going to keep pooping and pooping until you're dead. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things that gives you diarrhea, but also you trip while you die, which seems like the worst way to go. You know what I mean? Pooping back and forth until you're dead. It's like, I can't think of a worse way, but also having a bad trip on top of it. I don't know if that's what you want to deal with, but you can be confident in the mushrooms you plant yourself. And mushrooms are not the same as regular plants, obviously. Everybody knows that. They don't have seeds. You can't plant seeds in the ground and expect mushrooms to grow. That's not how it works.
How does it work, Kevin?
Well, you have to propagate it. They use spores. And mushrooms don't grow in dirt. They grow in different types of substrata. They like logs,
Rotted
oak
wood,
logs specifically. Yep.
Okay.
You can get them growing in straw, cardboard, mulch, wood chips, and if you go online, you can order little plugs, and basically you take a quarter inch drill bit and drill a hole in an old oak log, and you stick these plugs right in there, and they're going to start growing the mushrooms that you want. Different areas, obviously, the same as what we were talking about, grow different types of mushrooms. My area is great for shiitake, morels, and a few other mushrooms. Oyster mushrooms are great here. But you can, and now I read about this. You can propagate the mushrooms you buy from the store.
Really?
I don't understand how that works. I don't get it. If any of you guys are mushroom nerds, I would love to get some emails about that and let me know how to figure this out, because I can't do it.
Yeah. I know there's lots of kits and things they sell online that
right,
the hippies do and get started. Mm-hmm. I'm sure the information's out there if that's some way you want to get going.
Yeah.
But
now, Chuck, you're a fan of mushrooms, aren't you?
I eat
I'm
mushrooms.
not a fan. I like mushrooms. I don't like them one bit.
I've been known to order mushroom pizza. I know you're thinking, well, why would you not get meat? I understand. I like meat too. I'm just saying mushrooms are nice. I also like onion and garlic. So, who knows? A couple things I wanted to note before we get too far away. A typical garden for a family of 5, if you want to be self-sufficient, you want to plan like 100 to 150 feet, 100 by 150 square, so
square,
whatever
right.
that is. Not square feet, but 100 by 150.
100 by, so, gotcha.
So whatever the math is, you can multiply those two and come up with square feet. What's that, 10,000? Something, 15?
15, yep, sounds about right.
Yeah, something like, or 15,000. Sorry, squeeze. Is that right? That sounds like a lot, but yeah. Whatever. You do the math. 100 times 150. Math is hard today, right? I haven't had enough coffee and it's rough. All right, orchard. Apple trees, peach trees, cherry trees, plum trees, grapes, raspberries, strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, asparagus, and rhubarb. These are the things you want to start, getting established and growing up. Typically, they say for a family of 5, you should plant probably 5 apple trees, 3 pear trees, 5 peach trees, 3 cherry trees, 2 plum trees, 10 grapevines, and believe it or not, like 50 raspberry bushes, 100 strawberries. So, it takes a little bit if you want to be totally, self-sufficient where you're living off the land. So that's something, to look at. Obviously, you have preferences of what you like, what you don't like. I don't know if I mentioned this last week, but I know my local hardware store at the end of the season, they sell plants all year long. They put online, hey, we're giving out free plants. And I'm just saying, you may want to watch for the sales at the end of the greenhouses and things like that. At the end of the season, they might, have things half off or whatever to, get a reduced price. I know in our case, they actually said, hey, all the plants are free. And we went down there and they were like, no, we're serious. Just take them and whatever. So I got, 5 or 6 grapevines. I got 6 or 7 raspberry plants. I got tons of collards and all kinds of, southern things that people get. And it's just awesome. But I'm just saying, this is the time to kind of look for those deals. Also, the fall is a great time to plant trees. I know those of you up in the north, you've already kind of missed your planting
Yeah, that's
window
it.
on
That
there.
window's closed.
That window's closed. In the south, you could still drop in, a lot of those fall plants. We just did the garlic not that long ago. That's typically something you would plant in the fall. But something to be aware of. Another thing, think about when you're doing a homestead is fencing. Having, I believe it or not, one of the things that really sold me on my property was it had 14 acres completely fenced, and then it was even broken up inside of that, where I have like 4 acres up front fenced off, and then I have
Hmm.
like a small like half-acre front yard that's fenced off. And it makes it easy with the dogs, where I can be like, hey, hang out in the front yard, hey, hang out in, I say, the middle backyard or the way back,
Right.
and that's different things. But I still, even with that, had to do tons of fence for deer and different things for the gardens as we go, and rabbits. Rabbit fencing is a pain in the butt to keep those rabbits out. It is. I had to dig a trench, around each thing, and bury the fencing. I know in New York, I was always fighting with the groundhogs, and I'm digging trenches and burying chicken wire and different things. Turns out you don't want to bury the chicken wire because, well, one, if you hit it with the weed whacker, as soon as it starts to get a little rusty, it just cuts right through. And the rabbits, basically, you get about 2 years out of it, and then the rabbits are walking right through it.
Mm.
Anything that's right at that ground level. Um, but now I actually buy, I think it says rabbit fence, but it's like your regular welded wire fence, and that's
Right.
held up a lot better. Something to look at. Not exactly cheap, but I did it. I ended up actually doing like cattle fence for the whole big thing to have, for deer. And then I did the rabbit in addition to that on the outside to, go down deep. And that did actually stop the critters. As far as the deer, I did the cattle fence that was like 4 feet, but then I did posts I ran electric wire for another 3 rows up. No, I actually don't have it electrified, but that ended up being enough to stop the deer from jumping in, because they're jumping into a wire, and you get the
Right.
idea. I had plans that I would electrify it if it became an issue. It never did, so that kind of worked out for me, and I didn't have to mess with it. I like the idea of barbed wire, but my wife is like, I'm not pulling animals out of it. Well, they're whatever. Well, you're at work, so that's something to think about. Fencing. Um, think about a barn. Outbuildings. Basically, there's a couple outbuildings that you want on a property. A garage is very nice. Garage or barn or both would be ideal, but usually you can work with one or the other. A tool house, a workroom, and then animal houses, a poultry house, or that kind of thing. Something for rabbits, that kind of thing. So I know my house, we had a barn, and it actually had an old farmhouse that I use as kind of a workshop and a workroom. This ended up being pretty big. I mean, it's funny because the house is a little on the smaller end of what I would have wanted, but because it came with the old farmhouse, I was able to put my gunsmith shop, over in that house. My wife has a giant room where she puts together flower bouquets and things like that. Um, and we use it for storage, that kind of stuff. Then we
Now I
have
know
the
you were.
barn and that kind of thing. Go ahead.
I remember talking to you about that when you first got that. Did you get water hooked up there? I know you were having some issues with some sinks. Was that right? What was the situation with that?
So it's still, I ended up having to put a new faucet in the sink. It is only cold water, and I have the drain is kind of lousy. They basically had it, what is it? I don't know, where they throw the like 55-gallon drum in the ground, and that's your septic kind of thing
Oh, that's it.
for the
Okay.
sink. And
Yeah,
even
yeah.
that,
It
I think
works,
it
but
basically clogged up and drained very slow. So I need to revisit that. It does drain, but questionably. Uh, who knows? I'll get there.
Yeah,
But
no, I
either
mean it
way,
takes time on that sort of stuff, but I mean it's good
that's
that you
it.
actually have water coming in, so that's a big plus for that
Yeah.
for those
Yeah.
outbuildings. You know, electricity and water is huge when it comes to those outbuildings. You don't think about it as much, but it's nice to be able to turn the lights on in your tool shed so you can see what you're looking for.
Exactly. And even if the building's way out, then solar is maybe the option.
Hmm.
I know I have 3 gardens going. I think 2 are 50 by like 75, and then I have a large one that's like 200 by 100. The
Hmm.
one that's 200 by 100 is kind of far out where I had to run water to it. And otherwise, the wife was just dragging hoses, all across the yard all the time
Hmm.
and whatever. So that was, another thing. I had to buy like a subsoiler to dig a trench,
Right.
and that paid off and whatever. And now I have a spigot that's out there, and of course you get ones that shut off under the frost line, and so you can leave it out all year and have water there all the time. That's kind of
Right.
cool, because your season might go longer than when you're hitting the nights that are 30 degrees or whatever.
Right.
This year we finally built a greenhouse. That's something you may want to look into and add.
Yeah. And
um
those greenhouses, a lot of people you can spend thousands of dollars
yes.
building a greenhouse or having somebody build a greenhouse. But you can also put one up for a couple $100 at most with some plastic sheathing and some PVC pipe. I mean,
So
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I put together a greenhouse. The one we did, we used pallets for the base,
Hmm.
and we used cattle panel to make an arch across the top. I actually put together a YouTube video. I haven't thrown it up yet. I'll get it out there in the next week or two, and that way you guys can check it out. But bottom line, it still ended up costing me about $350 all in.
Okay.
I had to buy a screen door for the front to get in and out. They're like $70 anymore. Things are,
Yeah.
not as cheap as they were. You used to be able to buy your $19 screen door. That's
Yeah.
not really a thing anymore. Um, Usually there are, windows on the side of the road and that kind of thing. People always buy the reclaimed windows, and I see them around here for $15-$20, but you got to drive 20-30 miles to go find one, where they are or whatever. I I ended up spending $100 on a window, and maybe that wasn't the best move for money wise, but I wanted something that you could, hit a latch and open it right up, and it opens and it has a screen and it's easy and it works. So between those two things, um, I didn't find plastic sheeting as thick as I wanted to locally. That's something you got to plan ahead really and order. I bought it at Lowe's. I ended up getting 4 mil, which is it's still not that thin, but
Hmm.
it's not gonna last years and years. Um, but with the 4 mil, I was able to get, I think, 20 foot by 100 foot, or it might even been 200 feet for $68. But bottom line, I kind of did the math, and it looked like I could actually put it on there 3 different times. So, I can kind of get ripped to shreds. I can do it 3 different times, and it
Right.
cost me $68. There wasn't a cheaper option that I could get the entire roof covered in one, piece, because I
Right.
needed the width to be the 20 feet. If I did the 10 feet or whatever the other choice was, it wasn't going to give me the width, and it would have had overlap. And I was just worried about it leaking and whatever.
Right.
So I was like, you know what? If I buy the thinner, I can do it a couple times, and who cares if I have to re-plastic it, which I'd say took 2 hours at most. If I
Hmm.
have to do that every couple of years, so what? Who cares?
Right.
I mean, it's not ideal, but I don't want more work, but you can only spend so much money, that and so much time. And then the cattle panels were like $18 3 years ago, and now they're like $35. That
Yeah,
kind of,
those really
nothing's
went
what
up in
you,
price.
yeah,
Yeah.
nothing's what you remember it. All right. Another thing I would say is your neighbors. One of the things about a homestead, when you pick a property, either right when you buy your house, right when you move in, or maybe beforehand, you should check out the neighbors. Stop over and say, hey, I'm looking at buying this house here, and wonder what you think, and see if you can be a little friendly. Even if you're not hanging out and you're not social buddies, just having that connection is worth something. Getting to know your neighbors and connecting with them, having them as a real resource is worth something.
Right.
um it really it can help. Being able to borrow a tool. I know my neighbor, one time I was at work, came over and shot one of the big snakes and getting in the chicken coop for the wife because I'm out at work.
Right.
um Stuff like that. I know we had a mutual fox problem with foxes getting in the chicken coops. And when I shot the fox, well, one, my neighbor came over. Hey, I have all these trail cameras. I'd be happy, for you to use them. And because it wasn't hunting season, he's like, you can put them around the yard and we can get all these pictures and it'll be great. Help me with that. I was able to, really cut down the amount of time I needed to be sitting out waiting for a fox.
Right.
And I was able to, get them a lot quicker than, I would have otherwise, because I had networked with my neighbor. And then when I shot him, he's like, hey, can I have the fox fur? I want to, put it together for my kid and make it nice. And that was, but bottom line, you build up those relationships. Hey, I have a leaf blower. Hey, I have a tiller on my tractor. I can come over and help you. Hey, I have, these different things that you can help each other out. And that's worth something. That has real value. And that community, when times and things get more desperate, that's going to be, that's going to pay off. Being close with people is only going to be a benefit as opposed to a negative. Doesn't mean you should show them everything you got, but you should build up those relationships and be kind, be helpful. Extra land is always, a nice. Is it somewhere where the taxes and things like that are going to be, better, where you can actually stay there long term?
Right.
That's always one of the things. All the properties I've moved to over the years, you're a lot of times afraid to invest in time, effort, money to the property, because you're like, yeah, I don't know that I want to stay here. Not my forever home. I'm not going to be here all the time and that kind of thing. So how about you pick a property that is your forever home, that is
Mm-hmm.
going to be where you want to kind of ride out things, or at least have a plan. Say, hey, we're going to do the farm until we're 65 or whatever, and we don't want to do it anymore. Then we're going to sell it and go somewhere else. But know what you're getting into and choose the place that's going to be right. So that's something to think about. I don't know. What else, Kevin? What else would you want on the homestead?
Yeah. Well, one thing that would be ideal, but not, it's not always possible, is to set up a part of your property that's going to be inviting to animals for harvest. Um,
Yes.
Deer, deer. Basically, all over the United States, you can find white-tailed deer. Certain places
Yes.
have better things to hunt, elk and things like that. Um, Rabbits are great; they're all over the place. Squirrels all over the place. Um, but deer love things like they love clover. If you
Yes.
can plant a crop of clover or alfalfa out in the yard, stuff that you're not planning on harvesting. Um, Things that maybe close to your house. Maybe you are in your bathroom taking a dump and you see a deer, walking through your backyard, and you want to get him real quick. I don't know, whatever works out for you. But people deal with seasons for hunting and things like that. One thing that I think about is A lot of people talk about, if things go south, things get bad, they're going to start hunting.
Yeah.
That's not going to be the case. You're going to have 2 or 3 months. Seasons aren't going to matter to people that are hungry. And if you have 1 million people out there that don't know what they're doing, some of them are going to get lucky. Enough of them are going to get lucky that you're not going to be able to find those 8-pointers that you were hunting last year. You're gonna have a hard time finding. They said the white-tailed deer population decreased by 80% during the Great Depression.
Wow.
That's the kind of thing you're going to be dealing with. It's a great idea to have a place where deer are accustomed to coming to.
Right.
A big clover patch is great for that.
Acorn trees. Yeah,
right.
There's a lot of things out there that
rabbits,
can really bring
things like that you're going to want to bring into the property. You might in a section of your property if you have a space dedicated to encouraging wildlife, and just something to think about, something to keep in the back of your mind. But also maybe spend some time and invest in researching what some of these animals will do. Now, we talk about gardening and these sorts of things. You also might want to think about setting up a food forest.
Yes.
Someplace where you can harvest food, where you can just you can forage. Basically, you're foraging in a place that's designed for foraging. And we talked about apple trees, we talked about nut trees and fruit bushes and things like that. Those are things that are going to provide for you without you having to take care of them constantly. And you can set up, grapevines are the same way. You can set up spaces in your property that are where the plants are work in a symbiotic way,
right?
Where they work with one another. Maybe your grapevine is growing up your apple trees. Maybe your bushes are protected from the wind and the elements by your trees. You should think about doing that sort of stuff as you're designing your property. You should think about, what things that you can harvest, and, maybe it'll take 5 or 10 years to do this, but what things can you harvest year after year without having to break your back, digging up the yard every year.
Right.
Things that are going to produce for you without you having to, kill yourself every year after year, tilling the soil and planting the seeds and those sorts of things. The ideal homestead is one that you can harvest the food without having to work your ass off every single day. Now, on an acre of land, that's not really going to work out. But when you get up into the areas of 10 acres, 15 acres, 100 acres, you might be able to really design a property that's going to be self-sustaining without hours and hours of manual labor. And when you're working with a farm, that's what you're dealing with. And we talk about fencing, and if you can get the fencing up, just right, and get everything fenced in the right way, that's great. And if you have certain areas that aren't fenced in, where the deer, the rabbits, the turkeys are going to come through your property, there's also value in that.
Right. Well, I know my fence that goes around the whole property apparently doesn't slow down the deer. They don't think twice. Every now and again, I have to go out and do a little fence mending to, find out where the animals are getting through. I know that the fox has no problem coming in and out of my fence, even though I worked pretty hard to keep that from happening. Nothing is exactly foolproof, but we can always work towards better. That's what it is. And that's the thing. The more you do, the more you can, kind of spread it out. Other things to look at, maybe solar, bringing in some off-grid power, finding a way to work that out. Ensuring that you have a way to get water if the power's out, or at least alternative power to get your water. That's something you want to plan ahead for. Maybe a rain catchment system, setting up something like that. Think about location and layout, where you can put things to, just have convenience. You don't want to be running back for a tool, a million miles away all the time. I found, I don't know. I just buy more tools. So I have tools in the barn. I have tools in the house. I have tools, because there's certain things you do all the time that, also building up a supply of farming tools. I just went to Tractor Supply, and basically the pitchfork that we use for digging was $29 3 years ago, $39 last year, and it's $59 this year.
Holy shit.
Yeah,
for
exactly.
Pitchfork.
Yeah, the size of a small spade shovel. I'm like, are you kidding me? And that's insane. And we're breaking up the dirt with it and whatever. It's that like four prong spade thing, whatever the hell it is.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
What you call it, a digging fork or something they call it. I don't know. Anyway, bottom line, things are going up. So having tools on hand, it's funny because they say it's not that things are going up, it's that the value of the dollar is going down. Now, that's kind of like looking at your glass half full or half empty, but it kind of, that's the thing, is the dollar really is losing value in the world. And another thing to kind of motivate you to get out and kind of set your property up more like a homestead is that you want to, sorry, I'm distracted for a second.
When you're setting up your homestead, from scratch.
Yeah. Sorry. When you're setting up your homestead, you may want to, sorry, I had something going on in my headphones there and it threw me for a second. So anyway, but you want to make sure that, realize that America is importing twice as much food as it produces every year now. That's crazy when you think about that we're a chief importer. We're the highest importer of any country in the world of food right now. And we're going in the wrong direction. And being able to set up your property and do that, for yourself will make the difference. When you can take care of your own, you're not dependent on the government. You're not dependent on your neighbors. You're not dependent on a handout. That's your job as a provider for your family, is to take care of things and handle business. And having the food and the things under your control, that's when, you're prepared. That's when you can sustain things. And, it's always great to have a food supply and do the prepping like we talk about. And you never know when injury or, some kind of blight on your crops or something comes in and eats all your chickens. When something goes off, it's good to have a backup and be prepared. But it turns out having a garden is a backup to the natural systems that are already in place. So it really is about being prepared. And I would say make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Maybe leave comments and subscribe to the podcast wherever you download it. We have a great email list that we send out things as they come up. And I know there's a lot of Black Friday sales coming up, and I've been trying to put out the deals that I find so I can keep you guys, in the good gear for cheap. If you want to get on that email list, it's preppingbadass.com. There's a link to sign up right over there. And, you guys have show ideas, topics, things you want to hear about, things you want to tell Kevin he's wrong about. You can email us at preppingbadass@gmail.com. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I would say stay safe, and we will talk to you guys next week.